Okay. Okay, then.
But we don't have purview, you know what I'm saying? We just say, what color is it? What color
Right.
shingles is it? Are you gonna do?
Well, at the same time, we had a graphic representation of what it was
Right.
going to look like, and if it's up on cinder blocks, it's not what we approve.
Well, you
Right.
you have pictures of a standing building that's
On the
not-
ground.
Yeah, that's not
Not jacked
in
up
place
full
or
through the air.
anything. And of course, there are always exceptions on when they put it in place, what really needs to be done. But
Right.
some of that's assumed.
We're talking about the shed. The shed. You know the shed that we approved last time.
You ready?
March, I was like, yes, I know.
Okay.
Okay, ready.
I guess we'll call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Parham.
Here.
Day.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Larson.
Here.
Edwards. Here. Zimna.
Here.
Okay. Now the roll's been called, we'll go on to the next agenda item, citizens' time. This is a time for any concerned citizens who want to speak about our performance, not about any of the COAs that are going to be distributed. You will have time when we do evaluate the COAs. Are there any citizens out there that want to bring up issues that we've done in the past, like we were just bringing up? Okay. Then we'll move on to minute approval.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from September 16th, 2015.
I second the motion.
Okay, I got a motion and second. Anybody need any discussion on this, about changes, anything? Okay, it looks like we're ready to vote on it then. If all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, we'll call that closed then. Let me sign this real quick, if I can find it. Here it is. Okay, before we move on to the certificate of appropriateness, I guess we do have a schedule modification that we need to bring up, right? And that's for this one extra permit.
Do you want a motion to add it to the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. I make a motion to add zoning permit ZP 2015-038 to tonight's agenda.
I second the motion.
Okay, I got a motion and a second. Any discussions? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we'll move on then.
Is that in the packet now?
It's in the back of yours. It's a separate
Very,
little,
very last one.
it's just a fence.
Okay, so I guess we'll move on to the first certificate of appropriateness. So, do we have a motion on ZP 2015-037?
Do you want to, anybody want to ask them any questions?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, the applicants are here if you wish to,
Okay.
the new owners of the McCormick House.
So excited. Such a nice application, thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, do you have any comments on this, Marshawn? I know you've probably been working with them on it, right?
I was just saying earlier, I think their parents thought I was talking to them because I'd stopped by twice to introduce myself. No, these are fine. Do you have some guidelines in your ordinance about fencing?
Yeah, and that's a question that we will have to address, or not a question, but an issue we'll have to address. Of course, our guidelines say, fencing's got to be behind the face of the property, but as you know, this property is kind of in a historic situation.
Behind the face of the property, I'm sorry.
The front corners of the
Front
property.
face of the house
Doesn't go all the way out to the,
doesn't go all the way out to the front of the property.
you see it?
Well, this one's going to be adjacent to Fayette.
Right.
No, yeah, we know, but the guidelines say that when you put a new fence in, it has to go to the corner of the house.
Oh, no
On the
further than the
front
front.
Right.
face of the
Well,
house.
I would certainly think this house would,
Warrant an
or an
exception.
exception for the time period and what was likely there.
Time period, what was like there, the,
It's how Pam
the
Stutz has
the
hers
St.
out
Paul,
to the,
yeah, the St. Paul property next door has a fence out to the, for the play lot
Right.
area. I mean, you know, a lot in the area gives exception for this, but I just want to make sure that we do discuss this and let everyone understand how this does not comply to it, but why we do have exceptions for it.
right,
Okay?
I mean, I agree with that. I think the house and
Yeah, just
the situation and its location warrants.
location, representation of the property and the general area of it. I mean, it all falls into play.
So this house is on the same side, it's opposite the church. It is directly next to the old parish hall, or which is now the daycare
Yes.
center?
Yes.
It's one of the few buildings that actually survived the war.
Yeah.
If you do look at old photographs from the turn of the century, most of the houses, or most of the properties, Winterham, Payne Lane, Director, all had some sort of paddock fencing
Right.
around it to
Property.
separate it from the dirt roads that were serving the area. So.
Okay, this is the Cobb House.
Cobb House, McCormick House, I'm sorry.
Yeah, all right.
So what color, the shutters are going to be black? And the window boxes too, correct?
Yes, they'll be matching.
And the front door?
The front door is that light gray color.
Right.
I had attached the paint colors from your paint selection that Denise was nice enough to show me.
Lovely.
And then there's an example of what the
Yeah, it
door
just
would look
doesn't show
like.
up very well in that compared to this. That looks good. It doesn't copy well when we
Yeah.
make our packets.
So there's a picture of a gray door with a white exterior. It's just very neutral, but it just adds like a little bit of character.
Okay. And the lanterns.
And the
are-
door too, it's not like a historic door. It's one of the ones that were added for the addition. All the historic doors will just be white like they are right now.
And the shutters. Where are the?
Here.
How about the lanterns?
The lanterns will just be black. I don't
Black.
know.
Yeah, we got the pole here. Are you using an existing lighting fixture, or?
No,
Got it.
that would be on the diagram that I made on the first page where it shows them at the entrance where the fence is, and then
Right.
kind of against the driveway, just for, because it's really, really dark on the property. So we would be putting up like just a very plain, classic black post, which I put, and then a
Right, just a
traditional black lantern.
okay.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. I
Yeah.
just didn't want to
Yeah.
assume.
No, that's okay. Just something that adds to it. Wouldn't. It's nothing that is modern. It would go with the time period of the house.
I'm going to make a motion.
Can I ask a quick question?
Go ahead, Marcia.
So you have the three-panel shutters. Were you planning to use kind of the hanging hardware, or were you just going to kind of mount it to the building?
There won't be any of that like wrought iron hardware, but on the house, like there was shutters at one time because there's still like you can see where they were, but no, there won't be any like wrought iron. They'll be
Scrolls
right
or
onto the
anything.
house. Yeah.
Yeah, so you won't be using the hardware that was on the window
No.
or the
No.
decorative?
No.
I got it. You done?
Oh. Give me the period of the house. I'm sorry, I'm done. I'm here to help.
And like to make a motion. Oh, I'm sorry, was someone else have a
Still
question?
going through discussion.
Oh,
so-
okay, sorry.
This is the window box that you're going to be using.
We are building everything, like the shutters and the window boxes. So they'll be the same as the ones in the picture, and that's an example of like a plain black window box that,
Okay, yeah, I didn't know if this was representing the window boxes or.
yeah.
Okay.
Just very simple and like that one that's shown.
Are you using just a pole, or are you going to use a crossbar in the pole on each location, or are you just? gonna
We're
use the
doing
pole?
just a pole.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just trying to get everything as detailed as possible.
Of course.
You want to make the motion so we can
Howard
discuss
Ken
it
was
then?
asking questions, so I didn't want to interrupt him.
Yeah, I think that's about all I had.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve zoning permit 2015-037 for 6745 Fayette Street.
A second motion? Oh, I'm sorry.
The fence can be built out in front of the house in consideration of the period that the house was built and the surrounding properties. Is that good? You like that? Okay.
That's fine. Except into our guidelines
And
because.
Because of the, right.
Yeah.
The window shutters will be black. The window boxes will be black. The front door will be pearl gray. And the lanterns along the driveway will be black. Now you can second
I second the motion.
Okay, I got a motion and a second. I guess just for added discussion, I'm a little bit hesitant on approving it as this because we haven't really gone into detail on what kind of head we're going to have on this lantern. As long as we have some type of descriptive detail that it's going to fall within, you know,
it. Right.
like I'm assuming you're just going to get the square lantern that tapers with the,
Yeah, exactly.
the whatever you call that, the scoping.
I could always pull up a picture right now if you'd like, and I could email it to you, like right now, so you have it.
Like right now, like I want to do it right now.
Just because I want to be able to, you know, move
Do it now.
forward. And
She has them in her car, actually.
I don't. I don't.
Well, you know, I just want to.
No, I know. Yes.
Yes.
I kind of got that impression from what she was describing.
You know, it's the ones that are like just very simple.
One way to describe it, you call it classic lantern. You have, is it kind of the solid-sided or a rounded glass?
It would be solid, like flat.
Like the flat panels
Yeah.
with the lantern cover?
Tapered.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you can get lanterns that are, the glass is rounded. I think what they're going for is the, I want to call it octagonal, but I don't think it's eight-sided, but
Right.
the,
Could you add those details to my motion, amend my motion to include those?
With this shape.
black, classic lantern,
Oh, they're plastic, okay.
Squared.
squared glass globe or face, and black metal top.
Got that? Okay.
I have a few questions here. The fence, the material of the fence is wood?
Wooden.
It is a
Wood.
wooden fence?
Yeah.
Okay, because the picture was ambiguous, it looked a little plastic, but is this a wooden fence?
It is. Yeah, I think I wrote the description
Yeah,
underneath
it's-
that
in the
it would be
description it
wooden.
says
Additional description, yeah.
That's okay though.
I have several concerns and like to speak against the motion as far as the whole package, if you will indulge me for a moment. You have one of the coolest pieces of property in the whole town, okay? It reeks of character. It reeks of being the oldest house in the town. And you can dumb down this property pretty quick. Putting up builder-grade shutters, say, hey, I'm a Richmond American house or, you know, from Dominion Valley. if you just slap up some plastic shutters or even wooden shutters, just to fix them to the side, you're going to, and as far as a homeowner, the value of your property is in the character
Okay.
of it.
I have already done lots of research on this house, and we appreciate the history that is in the house. The house originally had shutters, so by us putting shutters, we are returning to the original history of the home.
That's fantastic. I think that's wonderful.
And I don't think we're dumbing down anything.
The operable, I would really ask that you consider, making them actual operable shutters. I can't imagine you only have 2 windows.
We have more than 2 windows.
Well, in the front.
We have many, obviously you haven't seen the house because there are more windows than that.
Well, of course, I'm just looking at the front of it, that faces
Uh-huh.
the road. But,
That's not even the one that faces the road. No.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
But yeah, it really, and the when this house was originally built,
In 1800.
yeah, you wouldn't have had it was not characteristic for them to have had a metal post. It was, at least the one that.
That's because there was no electricity.
Correct. But I think that a wooden post might be much more appropriate for this, and I would definitely like to see the actual lamp, on top of the post, the one that she said that she, right? Because I think that's important. But yeah, I mean, certain things like the windows, the shutters to really look good. The shutter needs to be half the size of the window and actually be able to close. I just really like to consider that because just putting up a fixed shutter on this house, I think it would be it would hurt the
Okay, well,
value and
I disagree. And it is my house. It's our house. We've purchased it. You didn't purchase it. And so I have to disagree with you. But I appreciate your feedback.
yeah, I mean, the fence I think is fine. I'm having no issue with the fence and bringing it on out to the front. I think that's appropriate waiver because again with the with period and also the property next door. But I'd like for you all to consider the materials in this very special house.
I mean, I think they have considered the materials, though. I mean, I think.
Because it's wooden on the outside, right? Correct? So if we're using wooden shutters, I think that's going along with it as well. We're using a wooden fence. We're not doing any crazy colors. We're using we're using historical classic colors that are going along with our color scheme that she has picked out. So I think everything is in line.
I mean, we let the church across the street and the steeple use on their shutters modern-day materials, so.
Yeah, it's just because they're like, one thing we talked about that, though. That
No,
was
I
part of our
understand
discussion,
that,
and the
but
fact that they were way up
At
high
this,
and
in
no
this
one-
day and age, you have to marry old and new for the materials to last and to, I mean, it's just a different time now. Where are you gonna run the power for the light if it goes down through a wood post? On the lantern?
You can curve the sides, there's lots of ways.
Okay, I disagree, but,
I like your idea about the shutter, and I think it was a good idea to present that as just an idea. Now, of course, I think that ultimately that would be up to you, but I like the idea of that just as a thought to throw out there.
You have something to say?
I'm trying to be
He's
diplomatic.
getting
So,
good words.
Get my thoughts here. When you look at places like Winterham, when they reinstall the original shutters with the hardware. So I respectfully disagree in the fact that, yes, you've bought the house, but it is a contributing resource, and there is some discretion to make recommendations to make it more period specific. So, for instance, if you were to go to Winterham, which is younger than, obviously, the Cobb House, it's a good point. If you were to close the shutters, they would fully enclosed. So I think if you're hand making the shutters, a recommendation to say, hey, could you make them wider so that on the house, and I see your point, if I understand, if you look at some of the newer houses, the shutters are just a treatment. But sometimes your eye will look at it and say, well, those shutters seem really narrow. Well, in this house, when it originally had shutters, it was probably for weather protection. And so it would make sense to have a larger dimension shutter that would, in theory, cover the entirety of it, and so that when you look at it, you can tell that the addition may not have been the same. The later addition in the 50s was with newer ones, but I think those types of things. With hardware, I think they can get expensive, but at the same time, if you were to be correct, the original shutters at the time would have had the hardware. But I think more of my recommendation would be if there's a concession to get the wider shutter to fully enclose, that would be a good.
I never mentioned anything about the actual dimensions. I was responding to him saying it was dumbing it down, and that just the wooden shutters didn't go with that house. As far as the dimensions, for everything in the house, we've researched it, and you met my parents. They're very talented, and we would put what's appropriate for the windows. We know that the shutters should be the right dimension, that if they were to close, that they would close. And I was responding about the actual wrought iron that was pictured in the picture.
And that's what the purpose of the committee is, to flesh out those details. What happens sometimes if they don't discuss them, the work gets done, and then it's contrary.
We had a disaster not long ago, so
Yeah,
it's probably
I understand. I think it was more the way that he was presenting his.
No, I completely understand.
Yeah.
And you see, nowadays, we just stick 15-inch shutters on the sides of windows in, spec houses.
No, I get the
Yeah,
concept.
because, shutters now have become, what hood ornaments became to cars in the 50s and 60s, whereas originally in the 30s and 20s, they had been radiator caps. So then there was no
This is a
longer
bad
need.
analogy.
Well, no, but that's what they are. They're just decoration.
They're treatments, yeah.
They're just treatments. They're just decoration. People don't even think about the fact that your 15-inch shutter can't close, your 4-foot window on either side. Whereas, it would be really appropriate for this particular house, being such a resource for the community, to have, real dimensions, real shutters operable, or at least have the appearance of looking operable. And it would really, really, really add
I think she gets
if she had the hardware to go with it. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Any more comments? Denise, can I have you repeat the motion so we're all clear on what's on paper?
Missing a couple parts from our shot.
What? I think the only suggestion we made was the lamp style, more specific
Right.
detail on the lamp style. Lamp post style.
Fence can be built in front of the house an exception to our guidelines due to historical period of the home. Black classic lanterns with flat squared glass and black metal top.
on a black post, right? Is that what we're missing? I mean,
You said black shutters, black window boxes, wooden, so.
right?
And the doors are original doors, right? You're just painting you're not replacing the doors, just painting the doors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
the
then we're
front
not
ones
painting all of the doors.
No, just the
It's
front
just the
ones,
main
but
entry.
is gray, and the other
Exactly.
ones are going to stay white.
White,
Yeah.
exactly.
Exception for the fence is wood, painted white.
Uh-huh.
Shutters are black,
Wood.
wood, and with concession that they'll be sensitive to the dimensions. Window box is black. Was there going to be a hardware with that, or you're just going to kind of attach it to the house?
I think that there has to be, but it's behind it.
So, black wooden boxes affixed to the house, black wooden shutters, gray color for the front door. I think those are all the elements that you discussed. So,
Yep.
sorry, that was verbal. We have it on the record, though.
Yeah, as long as that's on record, because my signature on this is going to be per ARB
Per that.
meeting minutes, as discussed in the meeting minutes.
Okay.
Okay, well, we got the motion, and I'm assuming we're done with discussion, right? Last chance, guys? Okay, we'll go for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
so you're good.
Are we gonna move up the steps so he doesn't have to sit for a while?
It does go,
Oh, it does do that.
yeah, in our motion to put it in the COA. So now we'll move on to the next COA we have. We have a certificate ZP 2015038. Do I have a motion? People want to look it over real quick?
I'm trying to get my bearings. Oh, I know where this house, okay. I was trying to get my bearings where the house was.
The only question I have is, this is in an HOA area, so is there a homeowners, has this gone through a HOA? Okay.
So what do we do, just do a motion pending HOA approval? Yeah.
Yeah, the only question I have is, I guess, natural wood, it will be
Pressure treated?
pressure treated, or not pressure treated, but it will be, I guess, treated with like a clear, natural finish.
Pressure treated, colonial gothic.
All the fences in Green Hill are naturally weathered, right?
Some more than others, yes.
Yeah.
The HOA allows for certain wood tone treatments,
Yes.
and at this time, I'm not looking to change the color.
That meets the zoning ordinance requirements, Mr. Chairman, so.
It does, but. Being on the corner lot going out to the curb there.
Correct. The way the house is situated, 4 feet, behind the front building restriction line is fine.
Okay.
You're actually allowed to go up to 6 feet after the front building line, so.
Okay. And it goes all the way out to the curb, does it?
No, actually, it stops 7 feet before the curb, property line.
Okay. Up on here, I just don't see it. I'm good.
Everyone happy?
I'd like to make a motion to approve zoning permit application ZP 2015-038 for a colonial gothic picket fence at 6861 Jockey Club Lane, with the caveat that it be approved by the HOA. I'm sorry.
That can't be a
we're not-
restriction of the.
Okay. Thank you. Take that off.
But then what comes first, the chicken or
Or
the
the
egg?
egg.
Your standing stands independent. If there's a conflict with the HOA, then
Then that's there.
yeah, we have it on the
Okay.
application just as a heads up that you'll need to go through that. So
Okay.
we don't,
Okay.
but
Okay.
Any second?
Got a motion?
Second the motion.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Any more questions? Anybody have any questions before we vote? Okay, we'll put it up for vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay. Good luck with your HOA. Okay. Now we get to move on to town council update.
Town council update, where do I begin? So many things. Mr. Henshaw is going to be with us in a moment. We're going to talk about the town center property, which is moving to the forefront of the council's action items, right? Yes. So we're gonna discuss, they wanted to send it to the ARB first for the exterior design as opposed to making the egg come before the chicken, or the chicken come before the egg, I guess that was do it the proper way.
Yeah.
So we're gonna discuss that. And they had a lot of discussion on, the council did on the Harover property. And the majority of the council does not agree with the ARB recommendations.
Any of them?
A lot of them.
Well, my recommendations were prioritized, so at least we had to get some in there, right?
Very few.
So which ones did they have issues with them?
All of them. A lot of people would like to take down all the houses, just make it an open park. That's what they were heading towards, so. It was an interesting
Well, you gotta
discussion.
remember, ours is just a recommendation. They get to make the final decision, so.
What? I chime in, I guess. On that.
Go.
So we brought all three. We brought the PC recommendation, the ARB recommendation, stakeholder recommendation, relevant plan policies regarding development of the Harover property. Four overall concepts that all 3 or 4 groups discussed, which was active recreation space, some passive park space, providing some sort of small community or service facility, and then
That they were really against.
and then reuse of one or both of the properties. So we went through the council and talked about program elements, support for pavilion, playgrounds. The direction from the council was to open the hilltop to some sort of, open up the hilltop to a recreation use, although the recommendation was the pavilion to be more forward. Continue the jogging trails, provide the streetscape improvements along Washington Street as part of that. A single entrance was a recommendation with some consideration for alternatives for fire rescue access, if that was an issue. Partial connections with the Baptist Church. So, and then in discussion of some sort of small service facility, there was discussion about the first discussion was, does the council want to support some sort of, or look at some sort of small facility, small meeting space, bathrooms, public bathrooms, and the like, and the recommendation was generally in the area of where the food pantry is. And then the next step was, next part of the discussion will be, do you reuse all or portions of the food pantry to accomplish that, or do you build new? And so that's something that we took back. Those major elements, pavilion, opening up the hilltop, all the elements that I talked about was the direction the council gave to the consultant, which was an attempt to address all the elements that were discussed across all the committees and the policies. Kind of, I guess, the way I had couched it to the council was a compromise to try to meet all the competing demands for what that property is supposed to do. So the consultant took all that feedback along with the previous feedback from the committees. I believe they're putting the final touches on the master plan concept, and we'll present it to the council. I don't think we have a firm, was that? At the work session on Monday, so we would encourage you to come and to listen to that. And we're hoping that'll be the springboard for them to do any long-range planning, phasing. It will be options for phasing as part of it. So we're excited to bring that back to you. I think the biggest challenge was people trying to visualize what can be done.
It was a big
And
challenge,
how do you
people
make-
cannot visualize what's over there.
The symmetry of it. How do you make all these elements look and make it look good?
I thought
the
the work
cost.
session was at 5.
It is, but Mr. Carpenter will be presenting
At 6.
6?
So-
I can make 6.
Need backup.
Yeah, I can make 6 o'clock.
I think what it allows you to do is set up, again, phasing, hopefully it'll allow for phasing, allow you to kind of prioritize. In that way, the council can, move forward in a judicious fashion.
Thank you,
So-
Marshawn.
Thank you. That
For
was a
putting
long
it eloquently, because I felt pretty beat up at the meeting. Yeah.
I thought we had some good ideas.
Well, that's the challenge with something like this. You're having to balance everyone's, all the different groups that are looking for something out of that property. So.
When they say that they want to open up the hilltop, they want to just clear it completely out?
Take the buildings down.
And what are they going to do with the buildings?
I would just add that essentially what they're looking at doing is, when they say that it was determined by the consultant that the high point is actually where the old PD is, that's what they're talking about more when they say open up the hilltop. That's the high point of the town.
Okay.
And so we think it should be something fairly prominent. And so how you work into that. One of the things I would say is it's not an easy balance. Obviously, Councilwoman Edwards does look out for the interests of the ARB, but it's not an easy balance. We had very different opposite ends of the spectrum out there, but you all agreed to it being a public use space. And I think the other thing the council is very committed to is I think they have a little bit better understanding of what the Lewis homes meant, and they want to honor the architecture that was involved in there. So whether or not the buildings, what the future fate is of those has yet to be determined, but at the same time, they do understand the importance of honoring what was there. And, I think that's one of the key things that's going to be part of that public space. Would that be fair to say?
Right now, the plan would be to remove from the hilltop, whether we, leave it open space and now, do we ever put some sort of structure on it, like a gazebo or some other hard structure. I think that's going to be part of a later, but the idea was to create some sort of larger open space on the prominent hilltop, and that would require removing the police station from.
Do they realize that that's going to be right behind those houses that are now being built?
What's that?
If they take away the old police department and now have an open space, now you have 5 new residents that are now going to have an open space behind them. Like, we all want it to be a community point, like a point for the town, like where we can come and we can congregate and we can, bond with our neighbors and all of that. But if you put that open structure, that open space right there, then now we're going to have 5 new residents in our town that might be a little bit upset because they're hearing more of.
Isn't there a tree buffer that's going in between there?
There is a vegetated buffer that was screened. I guess with your point, it's a tight space.
Exactly my
And
point.
so the alternative was if you were to repurpose the police station at the hilltop, you would also have similar activity.
You would have a
noise.
buffer, but it would be
Well,
on the other side.
correct. I think anytime you have such an intensity of housing next to a public property, you're going to have.
And
kind
I
of the NIMBYs
completely
that
understand
we're
that. I completely understand that.
What we've tried to do with Mike Gorman, the developer of that property, and make it known what's going to be done. I think he had spoken with the mayor several times about the current state of the property, but we had followed up with him and said, well, we're coming up with a planning as well. Let me know when that plan's ready, and I will use that so that I can. It was the uncertainty, I think, that was a concern for him in the condition of the properties. I would hope that anyone moves there, does their due diligence, and look at that as an amenity. I have this amenity and play space right behind me. After dusk, it won't be used anymore and stuff like that.
And I understand that, but I'm thinking more of the fact of if they want to take that property out, now you have to put that in consideration, the fact of them saying, the new residents being like, well, we didn't know that there was going to be this open lot right here behind our house. And if there are some kids, and yeah, buffer walls, but I've got 3 kids. I know a buffer wall, you can hear kids outside playing basketball, or you can hear kids outside playing. So now we're going to have to come up with a whole new design structure that it's going to be good for them, good for neighbors behind.
You should come on Monday.
Well,
I'm just,
to me, is
I'm not trying to take away from many
No, I
ideas
just-
that they're bringing to the table, but I think that they
Yeah.
need to kind of put into the consideration of if you're taking that house off the property and we're moving everything around or kind of like shifting it.
I feel like my frustration at the council meeting was that we spent an enormous amount of time discussing and mulling all these things over and making these decisions, and not only at the meeting, but through emails and things like that, and phasing everything in. And this was really their first look at it. So to hear what they came up with in the beginning, it was very upsetting to me, since we put so much time and effort into discussing this.
So I guess,
That's,
yep, so we'll come back with those
Yeah.
on Monday, hopefully have a concept, be able to see. It is always that battle of trying to balance public need and the intent of that property being open space with those that may be immediately affected. You would hope, much like next to schools, those that would choose to live there would want to embrace being that close and proximate to those types of facilities. But the point of the landscaping and doing some other types of things will hopefully be good neighbors to each other. But it's always kind of balancing the greater good against some of those with the few.
I did have one more question. So they've stated that they want to remove one of the properties, so did they decide what they would want to do with it?
Well, right now, what the consultant was, what we looked at, this, sorry, stuttering today, it's a long day.
It's okay.
Talking a lot. We're kind of getting sidetracked with the discussion, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Brian's getting
sorry.
ready back here, getting ready to poke me. Is to leave it open. Part of the challenge is if you had the pavilion in front and the playground, in recent years, we've used it for Haymarket Days. So how do you create kind of those open spaces? We have a lot of tree cover there. So I think the idea was to celebrate or acknowledge that highest point in town. Having both properties on site may not make sense in the police station at that corner. So that was the direction. There was some, well, do you put a pavilion there? One of the plans had a gazebo up top, like a bandstand. I think the general direction was, no, let's first see what it looks like when we open it up and see how that plays into the recreation side of it, and then come back to you guys.
does everyone see that cat looking in the window?
So,
Going now.
but that's, again, that's a compromise. How do you, I think it's hard to do an active recreation component on that property, given all the other program elements, keeping the, you don't want it on the back side of the hill so close to Villages of Haymarket where you can't see it from the street. So, good points. So, anything that we're gonna tell me, Andy? Yes, the consultant will come back. We're all anxious
Yeah.
to see the final product, and
So the short answer to the question is they would maybe utilize the elements of the building without keeping the building. Like they might take the stone from the house and use it with building parts of the pavilion, or,
Okay.
right?
all kinds of things to do.
Yeah.
Put the outline of the building up there, put some sort of interpretive signage. There are all kinds of things you can do
Yeah.
to celebrate that being the.
Correct.
I mean, the other thing too is the food pantry is actually a better better architecture in terms of integrity versus the police station. But anyway,
Anyhow,
sorry, Mr. Chairman, digress.
We will be celebrating the Lewis houses there, though, by keeping the structure craftsman-like, right? Any of the new structures that we do build, or are we going to?
And I think that's where we're going to have to. A lot of those details will be fleshed out as we move forward. I think that, again, it's always that challenge of we got to come up with that general concept first, general program elements.
Yeah,
and then move
because we
forward.
did have recommendations, if you're going to tear these down, you need to have some type of historic placard or something to, like if you put up a structure that falls within the craftsman style, you can slap a sign there that says, here stood the Lewis houses.
This isn't the final comment
no, it
on
was
it.
just, like I said.
It's going to
that's
require
why
demolition permits. From
It was
the
so
ARB. It's gonna-
frustrating for me because we had spent so much time on it, and this was their first
Yeah, 'cause
go-around,
all
so it
that
was.
stuff that I was saying is still in there, and there's a
we-
recommendation.
and we brought that up
If
to
you
the
do
council that
you
it
have
was a
these
tiered approach.
recommendations, yeah.
So you're still going to review the demolition request. You're still going to review the materials of the new structures
Okay.
that are part of it. So this isn't the last bite at the apple for you to choose. I was just trying to come up with a concept and move forward.
Anyhow. Okay, I'm done.
Any questions for Susan? Only question I have, I was assuming that those were temporary signs that were put up on the Foster building for the Foster's
They are.
complex.
Okay.
What's going on with that? Because I see they're still up. I assume they were up for Haymarket Day, but
So I made a command decision, which hopefully that won't bite me in the rear end. The sign ordinance, Planning Commission is going to look at the sign ordinance, public hearing next month. Part of the challenge is getting people to visualize what the new ordinance is trying to achieve versus what the demands of the business community have been. So Mr. Cerny had been adamant several times and come to you, I think he wanted to come to you with that concept. And so what I worked with him to address was an example of the types of signage that people are interested in having on that building. That building's unique in that it's 3 stories. It can be seen from the highway. It's very auto-oriented. And so we're using it as kind of a case study. I made it very clear to the building owner, Mr. Cerny, that it was temporary in nature. It was meant to be used as an example during the sign discussion, and that if the council ultimately approved a different standard or no standard at all, within a short time of that decision being made, he would have to take them down. Also, if the council had an objection to those being up indefinitely or while that would also require them to put down. So there was several caveats to agreeing to work with him to come up with a temporary one. We did walk the commission or the ARB out there, not the ARB, you're the ARB. We walked the planning commission to the building, showed them the sign standards, and really couched it where, okay, this sign, you may discuss its elements, its size, its placement on the building, but what would happen if all 13 tenants in the building similarly wanted a sign of equal size? The building owner said, well, I feel it should be based on the tenancy or how much of the building that they take. Well, we can't enforce term limit, we can't enforce lease agreements. So that was one of the topics of discussion. So it is temporary. If there is an objection to it, we will get it removed. But in the meantime, wanted to try to get an impression of how.
Have we heard from any other business owners that they're upset about it?
That
know?
one? No, I thought it was just the opposite. I thought I was going to get applications to put more signs on there.
That's what I'm saying. Has
So-
there been any?
Are they waiting just to see what happens with Foster?
Well, I think, the public hearing, I think I'm not sure everybody in town realizes that the ordinance is under review. So when we have the hearing, we're going to try to put it up on the website, do some other broadcasting of that. So,
well, I don't mind that sign. I think it's okay. I just think it opens up a lot of issues.
slippery slope.
Yeah,
and that was kind of the
like you said.
impetus too, to give an example of what it would be.
I mean, to tell you the truth, I like those signs a heck of a lot better than those temporary signs that they've been putting on that building around the railings. There's like 2 or 3 of them around the railings that,
There's
man,
one
that
on
just
the
looks
top.
so sloppy. I'm just dying to see those suckers get pulled down. But
Well, one's
I
real
don't know
estate,
what kind of
yeah.
time is ticking
Real
on
estate
those.
is kind of, as long as it's vacant and up for lease, that can stay indefinitely. The Smiles lady I need to talk about, and then the church over here has signs up during Haymarket Day. So, with that sign, it's, again, you'll come back and revisit it, but its placement on the building, it seems kind of low. It does seem a little bit too large for what's going on in there. But I think it does set kind of the tone. So those are the discussions you'll have once it moves forward to you as well. So.
Yeah, that's about the only question I had for you, I think. Okay, any more questions for town? Okay, we'll move on to planning commission update.
We did not have a meeting on the 13th, so.
You did have a work session though, didn't you?
We did have a work session the week before, and we discussed the sign ordinance where we walked the town with Marchant and with our attorney and looked at everything. And then we also discussed our bylaws and discussed for the land use map, changing those 3 properties on Washington Street to commercial. Just in the land use map, making that recommendation to council. And those were the 3 things that we discussed at that work session.
Okay. Is that it for you?
Yes, sir.
No questions? Okay, that means we get to move on to new business. I see first agenda item is town center facade.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of us are here to talk about this with you tonight. Town Manager Brian Henshaw, also John Hiltz, the architect. So I'm going to pass out some stuff to you, and then we'll kind of talk about what I'm passing out.
No, no, no. I don't like that. Is that all there is?
Thank you, sir.
I don't like that either. What happened to the other one that I saw? Brian, where was that first one that I saw that you weren't supposed to show me? Is that gone now?
We're not supposed to be changing the...
What's this?
Did you not get one?
No, I got that.
Okay, you can. That's fine. You can.
No, I just wanted to.
Brian, do we have one more of these?
Don't want to kill too many trees with them. So.
Aw, epic fail.
Okay, the difficulty in handing out handouts is everybody looks at them rather than. Okay.
No, it's not.
2013, you guys vetted a town center master plan concept.
Uh-huh. I could hand those out for you. You could help you with this. You feel like the teacher?
Okay. 2013, you vetted the master plan concept. That was more to do with the horizontal, dealing with stormwater, parking. And part of that was a suggestion of, well, what would some alternatives look for the facade? And so what I handed out to you was a suggestion or a initial vetting of concept for what maybe you would want to do to change up the building facade. Okay? And what it did was it still envisioned retail tenants on the first floor. And you can see a larger perspective of what that, So right now, the council or the staff is reviewing this sheet, which is the site plan, which took many of the elements from, now you're going to have to turn it this way to kind of orient it to you in terms of Washington Street. But what that did was open up a lot of the corner on the town center property for public open space, created the drive aisles and some other elements that you see on that plan. But again, this plan envisioned continued use of the project as a retail property, and it was designed in such a way. This plan also proposes to remove the police department out back, although that's to stay in. So fast forward a little bit. The discussion about how to use this building changed, and the concept that was pitched was to provide a government center for the property. So all under one roof, have the police department share part of it, have our planning staff or the town staff share a part of it. And so as a piggyback to the contract to develop the site plan, the town also hired John to go ahead and begin the internal elements of how to make that happen, and then also the discussion of the facade. Now, the timing of all this is still up for discussion. What's going to go first? Renovations, exterior improvements, site improvements, that'll all flush itself out as it moves forward. So what I needed to, so tonight, a couple of things I handed out in front of you was the exhibit from your design guidelines, which speak to what the recommended design be for properties at this Four Corners. That's the historic walking central portion of the town. And then I also gave you the matters for consideration from the zoning ordinance in terms of how you evaluate it. So tonight, John and Brian are here to run you through some concepts on how to redress the exterior of the building. That will also require some changes to the site plan in terms of where front entrances would be. So we're really looking for your feedback tonight on recommendations or suggestions based on your design guidelines and just your general knowledge of the area to come up with a facade recommendation for the exterior. So hopefully I've covered that enough. Brian's got
I want to turn this over to John and let him do his what he's called it. They called it here to do. But what I was going to say is really what it comes down to is originally the council had basically set forth the process of doing the site plan first. And the reason why we did this is because we had some major drainage, stormwater drainage area needs on the site. So we went forth, we did the RFP for the engineering services and everything, and at the time, we were also trying to figure out what's the best temporary fix. Well, in the process of doing the temporary fix, we had a lot of things kind of start changing. New council came in, but not only did new council come in, we actually made a temporary fix on the back part where we were getting a lot of previous flooding. That has ceased. We still have a drainage problem in the front of the end building down here on the east side of the building. However, when the storefront went out, that no longer was as much of an issue, although we were looking to address it. So all of a sudden our attention kind of changed because now we had this availability on this end, and we started to say, well, what can we do with it? So we immediately started to say, well, we know we're going to need to go back down to the bare bones, and so we went through the process of demoing the side so we'd be ready to go whenever we want to move forward with the internal renovations. That's when we actually brought on our architect through our engineering contract, and that's how the process has been. And now we're really just getting to the point where the council it would very much, we want to show that we're making progress on this building and making progress to our residents. This has been a project we've been working on for the last year and a half since new council took office in July of 2014. This is kind of where the project's going. The issue is we didn't, as Councilwoman Edwards said, we want to make sure it comes through the ARB. So really what we're here to do this evening is I'm going to turn it over to John, let him speak to it. He's kind of come up with some designs. This is not one thing you see is the final design. Bless you. Not one thing you see is the final design. I think that's important to know. The idea is to get the conversation started so we know which direction we want to go in. So that's kind of what we're here to do this evening. The council's still plugging away on the actual footprint and floor plan, but really where the ARB comes in is to the facade and how it fits in. The exterior. So I'll turn it over to John. Sorry, we've taken most of your time.
No problem at all. On that note, do we have a time constraint here? Do we need to be out of here by? Not that I have this long presentation. I just want to make sure I pace myself. So, is there a set time where the meeting has to adjourn?
All night.
no, just the patience of the ARB, given that he and I are both long-winded. So.
All right. Thanks, Brian. My name is John Helzel. I'm an architect. I have a practice here in Manassas. I am actually a resident of Prince William County for 40 years. I know this area very well. I live in Oaksville. So with that, the basic design, when I work with the town on the more functional aspects of consolidating all the town uses into one building, we've been working together on developing this, and out of that exercise, we are proposing to do a relatively small addition to the building that's going to be in this back inside corner, so to speak, that'll take care of an elevator, stairwell, some utilities.
Yeah. It's got additions.
Aside from that, we're not really proposing any major structural changes to the building. So we aren't proposing to tear the roof off or any other major appendages to the building. So when we were getting close on this basic concept, and I started to talk and think about the exterior design, did a little research, read up on some history of the town, reading the guidelines put together by the ARB to see where's a good starting point. And my interpretation of the guidelines was was pretty rigid. Says we want to specifically, on this area specifically, this block, we want something that reflects an architectural style is at 1880, 1890 to 1910, both Victorian or federal. That was my interpretation of it. Now, with looking at the function of the building, or all the components of the town, I also assume that we want architecturally to read as some unified structure. And to be practical and economical, I don't want to propose to dismantle the building and put it back together again to make it look different. So I want to use the main structure for the most part, the geometry of the windows, the roof lines, etc. So that kind of set the parameters for what I had to work with. So when I looked at those guidelines and I said, well, it's folk Victorian or it's federal. Well, federal wins because of the overall massing of the structure, the relatively low pitches, just the boxiness of it. That made sense. Trying to make this building look more Victorian, bit of a struggle, probably would fail. So I started to scratch out some ideas there, and I was talking to Brian, and I talked to some other council members, and I said, well, maybe I should step away from the guidelines a little bit and see what happens. And what if they weren't there? What would we do? So I started to explore those ideas a little bit, and then I think we realized, well, I really should be talking to you and finding out. I mean, ultimately, I need full buy-in here, and I would like to know more what the board would prefer and how strict do we stay to those guidelines? Do we consider deviating from it? Do we consider even rewriting part of it? So, and I'm not making a strong suggestion for any of those. I just want to know where, I want to facilitate this process. So I want to know the temperature of the board and what direction to go. So, what I did is I put together just some quick studies, and I'm actually going to ask you to flip all the way to the back one, that number 3, because that's where it started, and that's where I when I was right. So you're right, the little corner, just for
But
quick
this
reference.
is what it
you
is
can see
now.
right, what you have to work with. So on that perspective design number 3 in the bottom right corner, that's what I'm proposing. That is basically it's a facelift to the building that's federal style. I actually did develop some other drawings that are much more detailed. I thought it's probably not best to bring those up today, but to look at a study, and it works. You can apply this federal style language to this building, and you could pull it off probably pretty well. But I'm not sure that's really the right thing to do. It's not a federal building. I'm not sure how I don't think there's a tremendous amount of historic value to the building itself. There's certainly some value to the structure and cost if we tried to deviate from it. I'm not sure how historic it really is, and I'm not sure how appropriate it really is to paint a new face on it. It's not a terrible idea, but maybe that's not what we should be doing. So anyway, that's basically the quick concept on number 3, and then if I go back to number 1, perspective design number 1, what I did is just look at it more architecturally and say, forget the guidelines for a moment. What do I think is a good direction to go? I mean, we have this basic structure, the geometry of the building. It's kind of boxy. There's not a lot to work with. So I'm proposing that we, in all of them, design a gable that matches the other side to give some symmetry and balance, help to pull it together so it reads as one complex. It's got some complexity to it, but it's one comprehensive design across.
Needs to be unified.
Yes, thank you. Unified. What I did was then look at some some of the buildings that were being built in that era, the 1880, 90 to 1910, and try to get some inspiration from some of those buildings that are local to this area. And what I kept coming across, in addition to nicer, more federal buildings, is more of a local vernacular that you would see in some of the one-room schools. So they had white clapboard siding. They had some bracket details. It was a hint of a Victorian era, but it wasn't really hardcore Victorian, lots of intricate detail and things like that. So it's a little more of that folk Victorian, but still getting away with the lower slope pitched roofs and those types of things. So basically keeping it simple, adding a couple of components to give it some interest, highlight the entrance, and really a practical, what I would say is a economical and practical solution to the design. And then the next one, number 2, I basically took that same concept and went a little bit further. Try to, again, not try to paint it as a period design or something that it wasn't, but have it sympathetic to the area, sympathetic to the history of the town, but also introduce a little bit more elements of what's currently going on in architecture today, which I think generally you do want to have some reference to the current architecture. I think in most cases that's more appropriate. In fact, I think that's what most historic guidelines from the National Historic Register, things like that, they want you to reflect what's currently in architecture today, too. Don't go back and necessarily just copy what's old and call it an old building, and it wasn't. So, anyway, that's these brief studies, and it's more, my attempt here is more to show a spectrum and to get some guidance as to how, what direction you feel would be appropriate for this site and for this building, and then I can focus in and say, okay, that's my new framework, that's my guideline. Yes, we're going to stay federal style, or let's try something completely different and scrap the rules, and so that's where I'm at.
Do we want to go around?
Yes. Start with our architect.
Thanks, guys.
Do you want to start at this end?
All right, well, having been doing this for, I don't know, a long time now, 10 years or so, all the charrettes that I've been to, all the stuff that we've been talking about in a circle, round and round for 10 years.
Round we go.
He's right. It speaks to his original design 3 as being what the majority of the people have said over and over again of this town, right? Not the board necessarily, but of the town. The feedback that we were getting speaks to design 3. I like the one with the brick in the middle, by the way. It breaks it up a bit. But
do you really?
yeah, this big one large
That
amount of
surprises me
siding.
about John. I don't know why, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind. I would if we did go down that road with this one, I could maybe suggest some pillars or pilasters or something on the side to kind of differentiate some
there's
of
a
the
story
some
behind
floor.
pillars, so.
Okay. If not, if we can't get columns, you know, at least put some.
I have a couple in my bag here.
He is going to roll me. He's going to roll me if we do that.
Okay. Design 1, I definitely see a case can be made for design 1. I mean, it kind of reminds me of some of the elements of, if we have pictures of the old train station. The old train station, which was built at the turn of the century. This has some of those elements from that. I think a very strong case can be made for this as well. I kind of like I said, that's where something like the pilasters would come in for if we did the federal, kind of jazz it up, for lack of a better term. like the porch roofs, the awnings, I like that from that design, the first design.
Right.
The
Surprised too.
the second design, it's not speaking to me at all. It's reminding me of what is going on right now. I was actually having this conversation recently with someone. Patriot High School, the little middle school next to Patriot High School, the elementary school down on not Glenkirk, but the new one,
Piney Branch.
Branch, right. This type, and I was thinking, I was talking to someone about how dated that's going to look pretty soon from now. Just in a few years, everyone's like, oh, that's 1990, or whatever year it is, 2015. I'm getting old. 2015. So, yeah, that not talking to me so much. I think maybe you could actually, work between 1 and 2. I mean, there's some maybe achieve some of the higher porches and something, but yet still try to keep it within the design 1 archetype. That, I think, would work. Yeah, I don't know. As an architect who's designed 1,000 federal buildings, I'm getting a little tired of them, I will say. But at the same time, it also does fit the bill to what we've all been talking
Which one?
about.
The third one?
Third one, right. And again, this one as is, as he's showing, is a little plain. We could do something to
Add to it.
to make it a little more pizzazz to it. To say, hey, this is the county building. This is the seat of government. Actually, you're right. Let's think about that. Do these other two buildings say, hey,
There will
the
be
seat-
nothing left for me to say by
I know.
the time it gets
is,
down.
is this the seat of power?
That's what I
Yeah.
say about
Yeah.
the first two, is I don't feel like they look like government
Structures.
structures
Yeah.
or,
Well, not 1950s government buildings.
No,
but
yeah.
I know. I know
I'm
what
not
you're
even
saying. I know
thinking
what
of the
you're saying.
age of it.
this
Okay,
is
all
to
right,
be
well, go
our
ahead.
government center. So it needs to look,
These look like rec centers to me.
Yeah.
Exactly.
1 and 2.
I would
Barns.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
You got to have a tough skin being an architect because you guys are just.
Yeah, totally. I've been to so many ARB meetings.
I don't think that those look like government.
I agree. I really do. I agree. I'm not sure if I like page number 3 necessarily. It's like, ooh, that's great, but I agree. It's of the 3, it makes it look more official. So that's
Of the three, a more formal federal style.
what makes it more
More
Is it-
like a
formal government
building.
center looking building.
You're
Instead
right.
of an apartment building or something, or some rec, whatever.
I just, the rec center thing,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
is, exactly, you hit it right on the head, no offense.
And with the way that the new schools in the area are being built.
Right.
You don't want anyone to mistake it thinking like, oh, this must be like, a public school facility or a meeting area or anything like that. And plus with our signages and stuff that are going to be placed outside, you want it to pop.
Right.
So that once people drive up the street, they'll double take and, oh, what's that building?
Right. Well, certainly, I understand that we want it to say government center, and I do think that a more formal federal style, it provides that way to get there, and it does work with the bones of the building. There are certain, I have some concerns about it, but they do sort of come together pretty well.
What are your concerns?
I was just,
And this is more theory. We're talking about just architecture at a high level. You typically don't want to go in and take a building and try to make it look like something it is not. It doesn't have the integrity. I can put that aside to a degree, and maybe we all can, and make that conscious decision. That's a little bit of a hang-up.
That makes sense. I understand. You're making,
You don't want to make it something that it really isn't, but
Right.
I have a question. So, with the three different exterior features that you have, one of the main differences is that you have the three, what do you call these at the top? Those little hip roof, the dormers?
No, the dormers.
The dormers.
No.
No, the third, to the three one, yeah. So that's actually giving it kind of a little bit of a facelift as far as like, changing.
Well, they have dormers now.
It's all superficial.
They have them
They're all
now?
looking stick, little cheap.
No, it does not.
It does not now.
Doesn't have them now?
No. That's
Look
the
at
three in
the
the
picture in the
middle.
lower left, that's the exterior today.
That's what it looks like.
That's what it looks
Yeah,
like
you're
now,
right.
yeah.
It doesn't look that good.
So even if those were not added, would that give you a different, like, outlook on, like, how the building is? Because I think even if they weren't there, it would still look like three would still be my choice. Like the
Without
third.
the dormers?
Without the dormers. Like, are your concerns about changing or making the building look like something it's not? Right, you were saying something about that, like,
That would, someone could make the argument that that would be inappropriate to take a building and try to make a fake federal-style building. I'm not saying I can't sleep at night because of that. It's just a concern. It's an architectural concern. It may be one that needs to be put aside because there's 8 other reasons why we should do it that way. But in the dormers, not dormers, shutters, not shutters, arches, that is the detail of how we get there. The main thing is that the direction we're going. Because if you said, okay, that is the theory, that's the general direction we're going, is a more stately, federal-style, uniform government center, then I would go back and I would do 6 more studies on that, and we would look at those details and refine it till we get it right on.
If we didn't do the federal style, but we wanted to make it look government and official, I mean, is there another option other than that specific style to, kind of achieve both? Hey, this is the original building, now it looks like a government building, but it's not the federal. I mean, is there something that accomplishes that? You got any other ideas?
I think what we would do is probably, and it doesn't have to be these very dramatic brackets that you see at Pine, the elementary school and the Manassas Police Station and the Patriot High School. I know, that's what's happening right now. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be that. I suggest those as a reflection of what's happening in architecture now, which is in many times appropriate. You want to be true to what's going on in architecture, but there may be other ways to take. So it's not that very formal federal style, that's more stately style, and go to a more local vernacular where it has that. It's Haymarket. It's not another town. This may be more reflective of true to Haymarket. So there may be another way to accomplish that.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't say that.
Well, my opinion, I lean more towards the federal style, not because, it just makes it look more stately or anything, but just because it's more eye candy for me. If you look at it, it's got the dormer windows, so that adds a little bit of texture to it. You got the triangular application of the roof, which stands it off. This building is so big that if you kept it flat, I mean, there's just no texture to it at all. And at least the federal style gives it some type of texture. I mean, the other things, you do give it a little bit of texture or interest by putting the hip roofs on it, but they're still a little bit plain looking. And, when you do end up taking and balancing it by putting this peak, now you just got another big, huge, flat face. And there's no real details to break up this flatness.
True.
So that's why I would be leaning to the Federalist, not just because, it gives it the stately look, but just because there's a lot of eye candy on there. It's giving me textures that I can just totally absorb into, as opposed to the other ones are just plain Janes, right?
Well, I think you make a very good point. It's because of the overall scale. And when you take that, what I mentioned, there's these beautiful one-room schoolhouses or the old town hall across the street, and it's beautiful, but it's also in scale, the details in scale with the overall structure. And you're right, you take a however, 150-foot long building, and then you put those modest details, it does get washed out a little bit. And you're right, the federal style, you can nice big deep cornices and big chunky dental molds and thicker arches and things like that that help to fill in those voids and keep it in scale.
Yeah, and that's my only concern about this building is it's just so big and flat that it's very tough to make this appealing.
And sadly, it only has, what, 8-foot ceilings?
It's 8 in here. The structure is like 9'4" to the underside of the structure, so you got a little bit of room.
Yeah, see, most, colonial era homes had 12 and
Big,
14
big,
foot ceilings, which really added to the whole scale that he talked about. But that's where a good architect comes in to fool our eyes, to make us think that we're looking at a
stately manner.
big, taller building. But,
Yeah, well, like I said, I'd like you to balance it, but when you do balance it, that wall does get a lot bigger on the one side as well. So
Right.
it's just creating a larger scale again. So, any types of depth play helps out to break that out.
Right. And a federal style is very common, does have that cornice detail that cuts off the wall from the gable. It's right there.
Yeah. And so that's the only reason I'd be leaning to the Federalist.
So, yeah, and I think that, again, a lot of the, the houses in this area are this style, which I think you could, again, work at to make it not look like a really large residence, to do some elements which are more commonly found on public buildings of the time, like you mentioned the dental molding, the brackets underneath, the eaves, and maybe
Fake columns.
well, yeah.
Like half columns against the wall with just a fake column.
Actually,
I'm going to get you to turn it.
Just in case.
the corner board
That was
board
the
turned
original.
into.
Here, I have copies since you asked. You could.
Yeah, see, you work too hard. You should have just stopped right there.
Well, when I get a chance, when it comes around, there's a reason why we went this approach. We can explain it to you.
I told you not to do it, Marshawn. I knew these people.
Now, the dormers, with the slope of our roof, are those dormers going to fit in, or are they going to look like real long?
They're fairly long, about a 6'12" pitch. They are long. However, it wasn't uncommon in the federal style that they were slightly lower pitched roofs, and sometimes they did have dormers.
So you play, instead of making it parallel to the ground, angle it down or
I never
something,
thought of
stuff
that.
like that?
Warp them so they actually,
Yeah. Scale
Wow.
them down that way.
well, yeah, Walt Disney trick there.
Yeah.
Obviously you're trying to do this, economically. That's obviously the town appreciates that. Now, this third of the building right here, does it have a true reverse gable?
It does,
Yeah,
all the
back,
way through.
all the way back. And so actually that works in really well with what you've done as far as the addition, just bringing that gable straight back.
Right.
Well, what about the idea in the budget, I guess, that it wouldn't be too expensive to just put some piggyback scissor trusses on top of the existing, just to pad them out basically, and leaving the existing structure, but then just increase the roof pitch.
Get a steeper pitch.
Get a steeper pitch off of it, and then of course on the other side you're just you're putting a new reverse gable on there anyways.
Yes, this one's been applied to the existing roof that goes straight on through.
You're starting to compete with the museum the moment you start putting the piggyback to get that roof pitch.
Why?
It's it scales it up to almost a three-story building as opposed to a two-story,
Yeah,
just because of this.
this is
the
the,
roof pitch.
this is the important building in the town. This is the, this is the high and mighty,
Well, the question
you know,
is,
government building, dum, 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 you know.
you got to remember though, if you do want to try and make the museum stand out a little bit, you want to be careful what you do here. Yeah.
I don't, I think the museum is a pretty strong structure on its own. I don't think it,
It might even complement each other.
yeah, I don't think it's gonna be impacted too much. We're pretty far away. I'm okay with that.
I
mean,
do.
it's well
I
taken,
like
but
I like the one with the brick in the middle. But does that, my only concern with that is, does it go back to insinuate that it's like separate? You see what I'm saying?
what it
townhouse,
insinuate was that it was built in stages, which was so typical of structures
Right. Well, that's
at
true.
that time period.
Also breaks it up, which,
Well, I like the fact that it breaks it up, but I don't want it to seem like they're separate buildings as opposed to,
But then you gotta think also, if it comes
that's a
all
lot of
white,
white.
then it's taking
That's a
away
lot of
from the
white.
museum. Then,
Right.
then it's they're not complementing each other. I like with the stone middling because it does.
Marchand's like chomping at the bit.
Yeah, he's waiting for something.
Marshawn, can we get your personal opinion?
Professional.
My professional opinion, and I made some notes to make it quick. John came up with this concept based on the guidelines that came in, and Brian and I kind of talked to him right or wrong, saying, well, maybe let's first provide some other ones. So the fact that you're kind of coming back to kind of the same thing, I think justifies where he was going originally. What I talked to him about was being mindful of what this corner is and what this building represents. This was Gossham's store. Gossham's on the corner. This one building had shed roofs on it, and it was built over time.
There's the reason we demolished that
So,
building.
so when you sit on the four corners, you can look to every decade when you sit on those four corners. And so the challenge I think we had to them was, how do you try to pay respects to what the building used to be, but then create an evolution to where it stands out as the government center. With the Federalist style, I think the one example was just a little overwhelming. We don't really have any other examples. I'm trying to think of good Federalist style examples we have in town. I don't think we really, did you run a, I can't think of one that we had, so, is that? Museums? Without the columns? Oh. So it just became, talking to him about it, I was saying, well, if your training points to something else that could trying to make the building something that it's not, well, that's where I think the latter, the Plan 3, while it does pay homage to the recommended style, does it change the character so drastically that you can't tell that it was something once before. It was almost built this way. So I think adding some elements of the other two, and I've seen this before where you add some new elements saying, well, that looks like an older building that had some upgrades to it, that doesn't so drastically change the direction and tries to acknowledge that the history. So the original building when it was built was utilitarian. It wasn't meant to be that town hall. It was hidden behind Gossham's store on the corner, so it wasn't meant to be a prominent feature. So in terms of the gabled roofs along the top, that's not something we really would have found over time. Last thing, I'll shut up. So the concept across the street for Payne Lane was, what if the town hadn't been burned after the Civil War? What would the architecture have looked like? I had some architect friends up in Loudon saying, well, why would you try to recreate that? Why not call out your history over time? So to me, some of the middle ones, paying homage to modern architecture, is say we took a building that was from the 60s or 50s, 60s, and we put some modern elements to it that called it out from the rest of the building, so people can look at that and say, okay, Gossham's was turn of the century, the bank was turn of the century. Where I'm going with all the buildings that are around us, this really sets it apart. Do you understand where I'm going with it? So is there a way to try to mesh the Federalist style, but mix some of these other elements so that you can tell it was at once three separate buildings? I've seen some of the hallways that have been opened up, and you can see, even with it gutted over here, you can tell that these were some afterthoughts. So you can tell that it's been built over time, doesn't get too big with embellishments that, while they're sexy, they go beyond what we would have perhaps had. We were an agrarian town for up through the 50s and 60s. We never really had the fancy. So it's trying to strike that presence on the corner, but still pay homage to, over time, what it kind of used to be, and at the same time still call it out as a government center. So
I think that's where the brick in the center, like, that delineates the separate buildings. And I actually think that that looks, I don't want to say ostentatious, but more.
It's repetitive in the fact that it's the same material all the way through,
Right.
and so forth. Actually, just to tag on to what you just said, that's what we did the architect did on Giuseppe's.
Giuseppe's.
Yeah, he built this, colonial building, and then the kitchen area in the back was as a stucco, like, very reminiscent of the World War I time period of, as an addition, just, with exactly what you just said in mind. Another thing that I'd like to mention too, though, as far as like what's happening now in architecture versus then and what wasn't. Are you all familiar with the Lutheran Church up here across from the 7-Eleven on 15 on 234? A little white building.
Yes.
It's brand new. They just built it about 2 years ago. Across.
New Life Church.
No. It's a Lutheran church right across from the 7-Eleven, just south of the 7-Eleven.
On 234 on the
Waterfall
opposite
Road-
side
yeah,
of
corner
234.
of 234 and Waterfall and Route 15. No, not getting you familiar with it?
I'm familiar with it.
Okay,
they used to meet here. They used to worship here in town.
okay. It is a traditional white colonial church. Everybody that I know loves it. They love it. They just think, wow, this is great. And I had a conversation with someone saying that, why is it that a traditional, very traditional little white church building is considered so bold in today's world? Because, if you go to all the other churches around that have been built in the last 30 years, they're of this new architecture that is sort of being forced down people's throats. This is what we're doing now, and this is today. Well, everybody likes that.
Grace Lutheran Church?
I believe possibly. I don't know the name of it. But also, I have a kid who's going to college, just started college this past year, and I have another one who's looking at colleges. And we go visit these colleges, and these, they're 100-something-year-old colleges. You have the old academic buildings, and everybody loves those things. They're beautiful, these columns and the cupolas and all this stuff. And then you look around at the dorm rooms that were built in the 60s and the 70s, and everyone's like, these are gross and horrible. But yet, everybody loves the center of campus, the old section. Mm-hmm. And that's what's on the postcards of the campus. That's what's on the brochures, is the old section. Christopher Newport, down in Newport, Virginia, they have just spent $20 million or something, building all these brand new buildings, but they're the old academic Virginia architecture. Big, huge white columns, domes, large pediments, pilasters. People like that. It's pretty, and so we as architects, we get caught up in what is supposed to look good and what people think looks good. And down at Virginia Tech, they're actually kind of giving facelifts to some of their 1970s buildings with the concrete and what do you call it? You can actually see the frame, the wood paneling where they poured the concrete and everything, because that was what was happening at that time. But you know what? Ugly. It's ugly. People like the bluestone buildings of Virginia Tech, and so that's what they're incorporating now in their new building. So I don't think we should be, ashamed or worried about, that's an old style building, that it's not. Well, people like it. It's pretty. And I think that's something we need to consider, that it's just a nice building and a nice style that people like. So yeah, I mean, as far as where we're going, I think from what I get what you all are saying, I think this upper corner, with the brick in the middle, maybe with some enhancements, I think that's kind of where we're headed. Yeah, number 3 with brick or stone. We can spend some money. Stone, stone's good. You always like stone.
So I'll just throw this out there. One of the things also is John was going off of what the current site plan is. We actually, as it's currently laid out, I think parking, we're actually over what the requirement is. So we actually can add a feature to the front to give the entrance a little bit more prominence. When we were originally thinking, it was like what the master plan had come up with. We were always anticipating having like a portico to the entrance of the town. Now that might not, I don't know enough about architecture to know if that would be appropriate in that style, but that's something that we can play with. There's also other little subtleties. I mean, one of the things I mentioned to John when we were meeting beforehand, and even to Marchant now, is if you look at the very first perspective design, you kind of put that like little like brick footwall going around, wrapping around the building. That actually, believe it or not, is echoing a feature that's supposed to be in the site plan. Right at the corner, we're doing like a little footwall, which would have like an entranceway going into the town green. So it kind of, you get some echoing compliments. So, but there's ways that you can break up. I guess what I'm getting at is, long and short, is if we want to move forward just for the sake of time and stuff, John knows to go. He can bring some concepts playing around with the Federalist style, going all the way from giving those fake columns that are predominant, or maybe just putting just a little bit of a tweak to bring it. Because I know some of you all did mention earlier that you like the roof feature. Maybe not the one that came from the top down, like in Design 2, but maybe something of the nature that is featured in Design 1. Those are things that I think you can play around with. So we basically just need to kind of set him in a direction to be able to come back with like kind of more of a final product.
Well, okay, so I was a little confused on what you just said. The how much room does he have to play with in front of the building? Because it looks like you have 4 feet. It doesn't look like you have much. Do you?
Site plan would have a 5.5-foot sidewalk along the
Right
front
up against the
side.
building.
And we can also take out the 2 parking spaces that are there.
Because we're over.
Because we currently.
Okay, those are 2 handy. What? Oh,
No, not the handicap spaces, but the.
Yeah, take out those. Yeah, okay.
Just for the sake of design.
Right.
Make a whole nother statement with that.
The site plan I had, you still show the area that would have accommodated what's the technical term?
Portico. Isn't that right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that accommodated the portico there. So I think what we would, when Holly and I were reviewing the plan, I think general consensus is to have, and this is what we didn't go
Central
into.
entrance.
We didn't go much in the interior layout, but the formal entrance would be basically the middle entrance here. So we could easily move the parking area out in front and have a safe, walking. You have the area in front, but you wouldn't have to go between cars. You could just walk right from the parking lot.
Into the building.
Correct.
That would be nice.
So these perspectives kind of show some
Parking right up in front of the door.
I mean, that's just to give you a scale of what we're looking at.
But that was based upon what the preliminary design was.
No, right. But you could make it so it's just like open, so you always see that entryway into the building.
Well, it goes
As
back
like
to,
a,
you want to call it a government building. People
Right.
come by and say that's the formal entrance, they're more likely to say, well, that seems something more.
With the massing of the building, the only thing you run into the worry, just my own personal take on it, is if you do put something out too prominent, we've gone from looking like a government building to being a hotel. So if you put something too prominent coming out
Right.
off from the building, you look like you have the.
yeah.
what about like the flagpoles and
Through.
stuff like that?
Looks like a.
Yeah.
The flagpole's coming off, the plan right now has it.
It's in the town green, I believe.
Correct. It's opposite the wall.
It'd be in the
On that far corner, I mean, Gossam's corner?
So if you walk out this one right here, there's going to be an island right off the, one panel to the.
Oh, I see. This
Say it
is
again?
right in front of the very thing,
If
wing.
you walk out the front door right here, you look, there's an island right here.
Oh, that island.
That's where
Oh,
it's
I
meant to be
see.
by the entrance. the
That's
front.
this little
That's
place
a
right
feature
on
we
this
can move around.
Right, right.
fairly
It,
easily.
it make more
Well,
sense for it to
typically
be.
at a government center, it's out in
It would,
front
no,
of
it was
the
actually
main,
here he's talking about.
am I right? Yeah.
Yeah, it would probably be featured in the town green, I would imagine.
Right. Okay, so if, to move you along, I think what
Yeah,
I'm
long
hearing,
way to go
and
yet.
what I'm hearing myself say too, I'd like for you to dwell on design 3 and give us some options
What about
of,
that one,
of,
right? The
yes,
the
yeah,
colored one?
the colored one, yeah,
Go
the,
back to what you
Yeah,
just
no,
had,
well-
laying
Yeah,
out
it-
that.
those are similar things.
This one is that.
It
one.
is similar, yeah.
3D.
No, it is.
Detail, yeah, less
Okay.
detail.
Yeah, yeah, okay, less detail.
They don't have, they have pilasters, it's like a fake column bolted right up against the building.
Okay,
Yeah, I
but
like it without. Sorry, go ahead.
without what?
Correcting you.
I'm sorry.
Columns, the pilasters.
Okay. Yeah, I guess what I'd like to see, and you all can, chime in what you'd like to see, but, take this and move forward in this direction. Give us some options of, bringing attention to the center. I mean, obviously you have this gable that exists, which makes perfect sense to then mirror it on the other side. Another option, if you were building new, you might put the single gable in the middle and then have two
Right, on the other, exactly.
non-gables on the other side. But perhaps we can accentuate that center, because again, your floor plan, I see, has that center door being the main door. So if we can do something to highlight that, maybe again, I like to see it, instead of the 3 dormers, perhaps we have a smaller reverse gable that protrudes out from the building. Actually, you wouldn't necessarily, if you do it right, you may not have to have columns underneath it. I'm thinking of some of the Williamsburg buildings. There's I think the original courthouse in Williamsburg has this large portico just kind of awkwardly hanging out without columns, rather far. Maybe you put brackets or something that bring it back to the building as opposed to the columns. Maybe you have pilasters that then turn into brackets or something that have
Right, I
so
understand.
so instead of I like I don't dislike the 3 dormers, but again, maybe something like that to accent. So you end up with 3 reverse gables, but one which is smaller and protrudes. Something like that. So I think maybe if you move in that direction, I'm a big fan of, at least on the 4 corners of the building, the corner boards becoming pilasters. I think that really dresses up a design like that.
John,
You,
is that what you're talking
that's the one I was referring to, yes.
about?
Oh, yes, sure. Well, that building is always, actually, I've always thought that was a little awkward. Because
Yeah,
kind of like.
The historic courthouse in historic
Yeah, I
Williamsburg.
was thinking, today we can do that kind of stuff all the time, but they do it back then. And they just took huge wooden beams, cantilevered from one side to the other. But no, I'm not, I was just saying that I would actually like to see some sort of a bracket or a pilaster or something, but that's, again, that's the, I just see
Arshad,
that
did
as
you
a
wanna see it?
possibility.
See what it's on?
I do like the fact that these are, you're cutting larger windows in what we have, leaving the existing headers, but just increasing the height of each window is really nice. So yeah. This is, I don't know if you, well, yeah, I guess you have those arches, the sunbursts above the the side facade.
Right.
Uh,
On these?
Yeah, and on the side also. Because I was wondering if you should, I was wondering if you should close the gable on the end as well, but.
Oh, yeah. Right across here.
Yeah, or maybe partially close it. I don't know.
No much.
No, yeah, okay, fine, yeah.
Because I think that would, because.
Makes it too
correct me if
boxy,
I'm
yeah.
wrong, but I
Okay,
think
sure,
that that's
sure.
only gonna be an entrance, like, for the employees at the police department, like the officers, that's gonna be their entrance, and.
Yes, but you also have your prominent corner, so the prominent side is Washington Street, but what Jefferson Street, once the bridge reopens, is also going to be a
But I think it's finished, like, as a nice face of the building, but.
would you mean closing the gable, carrying this feature all the way around, you said?
that's
Yeah, I
what-
was, but her point's well taken, and I concede that it's
I
probably
wouldn't want to
fine.
diminish too much the Jefferson Street facade, but obviously you don't want to confuse it with the main entrance.
Right.
But will there be signage on that side also for the police department?
There'll be signs to the police department, but actually the entrance to access the police department is actually.
Is through the main entrance.
It's through the main entrance.
That's only an entrance for the officers and the staff.
Okay.
You would assume it would have something like town hall across here.
Well, again, actually,
Neon maybe.
perhaps you might look at, and if you decide on your own it looked terrible, then don't even bother showing it to us, but a shed roof over the door on, yeah, exactly.
Some kind of a
With some,
portico,
with some,
something.
yeah, with some brackets or something, just to get people out of the rain while they're reaching for their keys and reaching for the door.
Portico or.
And it does make it a little more three-dimensional.
Mimic whatever you do on the front, just on a smaller scale, right?
Possibly, or no, because what happens in the front is special, and that's where we spend some money for the drama. Well, I'm just talking like a simple shed roof with some
That's a
brackets.
secondary entrance, yeah.
What about the dormers along the top? The dormers along the top?
Again, I don't dislike them. I think they're fine. But again, I'd like to see at least one or two options of something, of a portico of something that really addresses, this is the center, this is where you enter.
No, I meant just generally, these would be a supported element, but is this element generally supported by the ARB?
That's what we're talking about. I don't dislike them,
Okay.
but I'm saying that I would like to see
Another option.
another option, whereas I have a third reverse gable that is protruding.
Oh, okay.
Now, the fun thing is, can we go as far as cupolas or?
I knew you were gonna say that.
Yeah, I didn't bring that one, but definitely looked at it. Yeah, without the dormers, it's not a bad look. It does, maybe, if somebody mentioned that it competes with
With the museum.
the old museum, maybe.
With the, yeah.
But it did look pretty good. If you didn't do dormers and you actually do a cupola
Oh, I
in
see
the
what you're
center,
saying.
which
I
is
guess- oh, I thought-
federal, I mean, that's federal all the way, so it would.
No, I don't. Just so you know where I'm coming from.
No,
you know where I'm
I
coming
know.
from. I don't think this is going to compete with. If competing is a relative term, I don't think it's going to take away from the old museum. The old museum is pretty cool. It's what it is, and it's great. I don't think that what we do here, even if we do I think us doing something really nice and dramatic here is only going to bring everything up to a new level. It's not going to hurt.
I think if
That
it's
at
all
all.
white, it could take away from it. But I think if we come up with something that gives it a contrast so that it just complements it, it'll be good.
And again, materials are going to be very important too, which is a later thing. But if we do brick, we'd want to do at least a authentic looking, if not actual hand tumbled brick. A stone would look fantastic, also. So yeah, I'd like to see something with the, again, to repeat myself, the portico with even and with and without a cupola.
Well, just for the sake of time, does anyone else have, Mr. Chair, I would recommend that I think, John, do you have enough kind of a direction of which to go in to come back to ARB by next month? Just to kind of present. And the other thing I would recommend to the body, I would say that the council does prefer, has some choices, but I think we know at least a direction of where to go off of. So I think if John can kind of come up and concentrate on kind of, here's two alternatives to a Federalist style, that gives you a little bit of creativity and gives you all kind of something, then basically you all then can make a recommendation, but also send forward the other one knowing that you're with it. Or, I mean, does that sound plausible to the body?
I think we gave enough options for him to work with to come up with multiple alternatives if you wanted to.
They'll have a whole book.
All right.
Pick one. Just show standing seam roof. Right now, we have an asphalt roof. We really have a preference either way.
Yeah, if you can afford it,
Standing seam, yeah. It fits
Well,
in,
there's
ties
an
in
element
the
that's
other
here.
elements.
And then we're kind of getting the minutia on that, so. And then the boarding,
I think that also makes it stand out from the other.
we have some utility lighting now. I think lighting is an afterthought. Once you come on the design, we can come back and revisit lighting on a lighter one. So.
While they're talking, I'm sure you can probably make it work. You have, right as you come in, you left the columns in the vestibule.
Yeah.
Any way to throw a beam across that? Take a
We
look
just
at
talked
one
about
out?
that. Well, sure, yeah.
Too
Yeah,
much?
try to preserve the structure, not spend too much
Yeah,
money.
well, I know,
but yeah.
it's all money, you're right, so maybe when
Yeah,
when you're talking price, maybe the column comes back or
Right.
something, but you to walk in, it's like, ooh, it's a column. What if you do it right? It could be it's not a column, it's a directional sign.
Right, kiosk or
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, it's a little awkward. I wouldn't have designed it that way from the start. But,
Are you really gonna need a ramp up the back? I mean, it's all pretty flat, I thought.
it's almost 24-inch grade difference. From this slab to where the new parking lot is.
Do you want to have a quick question, Mr. Chairman? So you can shoot me down with your look when I bring this up. So right now, on either end of this building is the whitewash brick that we have today. If we kept that, but put the shutters on it and the windows, so you still have the effect of the white, and then just do like the siding on the middle, does that, I'm thinking, what are ways to incorporate kind of that whitewash we have out there today and not totally resurface the whole building? What's that? No, I'm just saying, if you're talking about cost savings, you have that kind of effect, but you still do the windows, you still do the shutters, you centralize, you refocus on the middle, where you, see what I'm talking about, where you keep the,
Yeah, the lighter color brick on that end.
yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's seen as yellow, but right now, all of this is the whitewash brick. Okay, well, I'm just saying that's a way
There
to,
are other people on this board that.
I'm just saying it's enough to bring the windows in and the shutters to where you still highlight and give that uniform architecture, windows across, but you're, keeping kind of that old element of what the building used to look like. But I don't know if that would look silly to have the whitewash brick and then have the white siding in the middle.
It'd be a little hard because we're hopefully, and I agree with what he was suggesting, getting rid of the double windows. And when you do that, then you have to infill this, because it's a double window now. And he's actually going to make the window a little narrower, taller, but narrower.
Well, and you're taking the entrances too, you have to match the brick. Never mind.
Yeah, and so then you have to mess with the brick and so forth. But
But you could, maybe an option would be if you keep the texture of the brick, you do paint it. I mean, it's kind of a nice details painted white brick, and then do the Virginia red brick in that center section.
It's red now, but we wouldn't want to use that.
Yeah, it's sort of a range, like a wide range brick, so it has whites and blacks.
All over the place.
Yeah. I don't like it.
That's going to be another discussion.
Yeah.
You can stain it. You can actually stain it to try to get a more uniform color, but that would be, the federal style wouldn't have that wide range of color.
It was just a way to make it utilitarian, which was what it originally was.
Yeah.
I'll be quiet. Thanks.
Are we good with the facade?
So if I may, just if I could reiterate in very few words so that I make sure I fully understand this. Is that a good place to close? So we're comfortable with a federal style. We want to create some uniformity to read as a government center, but we do want to break it up in such a way to possibly hint at a history that maybe it had been built over 2 phases, maybe a center part, and then the 2 sides, possibly. And we're going to use historic elements, architectural elements, to give it that detail and character that it lacks currently. It'd be a little bit of a struggle because of the whole, it's so darn long. There's so much space to fill. That's why I keep doing that. Okay, I put 2 pilasters here. It wasn't enough. Now I got to do 2 more. So there's a lot of space to fill, but that's the direction we're going to go. We're going to look at maybe some architectural elements on the roof, make sure they're not competing with the adjacent historic structures. And then I'm going to come back and look at maybe two, maybe 3 studies in that direction.
Don't forget the side awning roof on the side.
Right. We'll address that as clearly an entrance, but it's a secondary entrance to the main.
I'm so sorry. I know we were trying to close up, but I just thought of something. With the structure over the side for where the police department would come,
This one?
Yeah.
That little.
what if it was like an awning? You know how they have like the smaller awnings that are like color coordinated, like black or red or whatever you want to make it?
Just do a,
Because you wanted like some type of protection from the rain, but we don't want it to completely change and make it look like you're walking into like.
you understand what she's saying? Like
You understand?
Yeah, cloth awning.
thank you.
Yeah.
Canvas.
A
I couldn't think of that
canvas
word.
awning.
That does.
Does it take too much away from it? Would it make it look like it's?
Well, I think.
In my opinion, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
if it's a functional aspect, I think there's a more historically accurate way of doing the same thing.
Yeah,
Probably not
because this way, if we did do some type of an awning going over it, it looks like you're walking into like a barracks, and we don't want it to look like a barracks. We want it to have something that but yeah.
Okay.
Last thing I heard, John, was some more formal treatment for the entrance on the front. What was the last? Is that
I
where you're
think it's
going?
more formal and maybe more substantial.
Okay, that's fine.
Pedestrian friendly, like right in front of the.
Our discussion was trying to, what do you do about the main entrance on the Washington
Right.
facade? And do you bring some sort of
Yeah.
elements over the door?
We were saying do something kind of like that, pulling it down, right?
Smaller, yeah, but smaller.
Or, right, if I understood, maybe some sort of like column type thing, possible.
Yeah, yeah. I was
Thanks, guys.
giving
Okay.
you-
Sure.
Yeah, anything else?
I don't.
Up, brick,
Do you want a motion to adjourn?
Well, we got old business, but we can always table that.
That's up to you. I mean,
Truly, moving on to the old business, truly the only thing on it is trying to move the science stuff forward. So we handled that
in our work session.
in our work session. So we'll go on to the next agenda item then and adjourn. Any motions?
To adjourn.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. So we're adjourned at 2 minutes after 9.